It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, May 30th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is talking draft depth, as well as a couple of prospect profiles of forwards.
Good subjects.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here with prospect expert Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can find us over on YouTube. We're on SiriusXM. Or anywhere you listen to podcasts, subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, I am loving our Thursday draft shows that we're doing every week. Once again, we have a spreadsheet link in the show notes of all the prospects we have covered. So, looking at this year's draft, wanted to touch on the later round picks for the Flyers here because I think it's a really interesting dilemma that the Flyers have. So, right now, we're going to ignore that Columbus second round pick because Columbus is going to keep it. That's going to roll over to next year. So, the Flyers have a third, two fifths, two sixths, and a seventh, no fourth rounder this year. And given that, that's like a pretty significant chunk of picks. But as we know, the later you go in the draft, the bigger the risk, the less likely that a prospect is going to pan out overall. So, how deep is this draft and how is that going to affect the Flyers' strategy?
Well, there's like three things here. So I feel like with this draft, I could go through 50 picks easy and feel like they're all very good players. They're not all top liners. They're not all top pairing. Obviously, but I feel like it's a good group. Then I know there's a lot of defensemen in this draft. There just are. So I expect of this draft, there'll be some surprise defensemen down the line. And so I think that's where you look at it and say, all right, maybe we got to take some shots here or some swings. The flip side is you sometimes don't know, even if I tell you next year's draft is deeper, doesn't mean that somebody hasn't slipped in this one that makes you put all those assets together to go get them because it's like, wait, we didn't even expect this guy to be in the third round. Now he's in the third round. Should we do it now or should we wait and see what slips next year? No, you do it now. You always have to do it first if it's something like that. So that's where the draft strategy and the fluidness of a draft comes in.
Right. And I think that's really what I was thinking here because that is a lot of picks. You do want to make some late round picks because you never know. And if you
Yes.
have confidence in your scouts, right, you want to have that
You
work
do want to
come to fruition.
satisfy some of your scouts when they say, "Hey, get this guy, and you could get him." I mean, it does make a scout feel pretty satisfied after a full year's work. It does. So
Right.
there is that aspect of it too.
Right. So like maybe a fifth round pick and your scout has been talking about a kid for 6 months
Right.
and he's there on the board. Like, of
Right.
course, you do want to, indulge that. But at the
Yes.
same time, with this particular year's draft, you have to look at it in comparison to next year and where the Flyers will have two firsts and likely 3 seconds, right? That is a top heavy draft batch
Yes.
for the Flyers. And so knowing that and knowing that you'll have a big opportunity next year to fill your prospect pool with some top end players, are you more likely to package some of these picks and move up to get a guy like that that your scouts are big on?
Yeah. I mean, here's the other thing I have in the back of my head. I'm probably 2 years away from getting Mitchkov. Whoever I get in this draft will be there a year or two into his administration, as we call it, or his era, right?
Hmm.
If I wait until next year, then it's somewhere between 3 and 4 years after that. So, all things considered, if it's somebody that I feel can play with him or would complement the team in something that we really don't have, but we feel like that's what help us get to the next level. And someone might say, well, how do you get that guy in the third? Well, sometimes you have to project, like, if this prospect fulfills his destiny, could do that, then I'm going to go for what's sooner because I got this guy on the way and I'm trying to build the team around this guy. That's still my main focus of really above all. So that's another thing that plays into it.
Right. And so I think there's like two things that could potentially happen here that I could easily see happening. So, number one, the Flyers package one of their sixth and one of their seventh to either move up in the sixth round or get a fifth rounder or something along those lines, right? To
Right.
get a particular kid that's been on their board. But could you see them also packaging up some of those picks to move up to get a goalie, let's say?
Yeah. So look, I always say I'm not a goalie expert. That takes a whole different level of expertise. But I always tell you who I like. I like Carter George. Carter George will be gone somewhere in the second, I think, or early third. Uh, I like Nicholas Kempf, as we've talked about. And yeah, I
Mhm.
think he might be around in the third, but he might not. If there's a little run of goalies, as sometimes it's hard to figure, guys will go. I also like Kim Sarinen, who I interviewed at the Five Nations. Never posted the interview though because it was kind of like his English just wasn't good enough to do it. But I learned stuff about him, and I like his mental makeup a lot. And so it gave me some insight. So those are three guys I like a lot. And unfortunately, Serena or for the Flyers did well at the U18s in the Worlds in this short span. Like he played a couple games and his stats were just stupid. He
Which will make him move up, right?
which will make him move up because he was a top guy at the beginning of the year, and then he kind of didn't have the greatest year. He had a 917 at the U20s, but then he got hot at the end of the year, and then in this tournament, a 077 952 save percentage. So, it's the Finnish U18. So, no, actually, yeah. So that should be the World U18 Worlds if I'm looking at the stats right. So the whole second half finish for him uh,
Mhm.
probably makes that. So, like my bonus, not my bonus, the value goalie here could be Kempf because people are looking at other guys. And so if he comes up, I don't know, if he's still on the board 6 picks into the third round, I may start to bushel up some of these picks because especially if I think Kolosev might go back. The Flyers know the answer to that. We don't.
Yeah.
But they probably have a better idea than we do.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is a possibility, given again, 2 firsts, 3 seconds in next year's draft, do they trade away one of next year's second rounders to make a pick in this year's second round?
Only if they feel like Kolosov is going to be a problem. Like we know how high they were on him, and they might still
Mhm.
be. But if there's like a little bit of iffiness with them, then you have to think about it because then it's kind of like, all right, then we need more goalies in this organization. And then that could happen, but I don't think it will happen.
Do you think it would happen for a non-goalie, for a skater?
No, no, I think goalie's different because right now it's an odd time for the Flyers with goaltending because you don't know how to count on Fedotov. You hear this stuff about Kolosov. He didn't even play in the playoffs, so you don't really, you know, he had a great time over in the KHL, but what if he doesn't here, right? There's always that if. Uh, and then and then you're pretty sure Urson is your number one for now. Is he your number one 4 years from now? I can't say that. I don't think they can either. So that's why there's always that little room, and that's including everybody that's in their system too. It's just they need to kind of cover their bases on that because you could see teams that are missing goalies, like the Devils and otherwise, even if you have a good team, you end up suffering.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I do like your instinct of if they're gonna make a sacrifice and try and move up to the second round or early third round to get a goalie in this year's draft. I think they could sacrifice one of next year's picks and one of next year's second rounders. I wouldn't trade the firsts away unless something crazy is happening. But
And I know what people
I
are thinking. They're like, "Hey, but we have Bjarnason." Yeah, you do, but again, not a guarantee. I
who
like
knows?
him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do think that it is kind of a cascading effect there with Kolosov and goalie confidence, and you definitely want to pick somebody this year. We've talked about that already, but I
And the
do
other
think
thing,
that
and the other thing, just to mention it, and I've been told Zavragin could be their best, but he's probably 4 years away. So 4 years
so
from now, that's a whole right? I mean, makes things complicated.
it does. All right. Well, we are going to talk about a couple of guys that the Flyers could potentially take in the first round, more likely with the Florida pick. We're going to start with Andrew Basha and talk about him coming up next. The NBA and NHL playoffs are approaching the finals, and it would be incredible to be there in person. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting those tickets even faster and easier so you can make that dream come true. And prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. With killer last minute deals, views from your seat, and their low price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying those coveted NBL playoff seats, MLB tickets in your town, and more. My favorite part of the app is it's great for getting notified about those flash deals, and Game Time lets you save even more with zone deals where you pick a section, let Game Time choose the seat for you. Best of all, they have all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, and your tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On tomorrow's show, we are going to discuss the results of this week's poll on which NHL team we think will make a big splash at the draft this year. So if you haven't voted, please do so. The link to do it is in the show notes. Andrew Basha, first of all, both of the guys that we're talking about today are on the older side of 18 with November
Mhm.
birthdays. So a little bit more physical development time than
Yeah.
some of the other guys we've talked about. So Andrew is one of those kids. He's 6 foot, 185. So not huge, but not small either. Right now, the ranking is in the 17 to 30 range, which is a lot, but some of these rankings are a little bit stale. So,
Mhm.
a bunch of the lists that I've seen have had him in that late first round area in the draft. Currently playing for the Medicine Hat Tigers in the WHL. So, we always love a good WHL kid. And I think, for me, the thing that has stood out in what I have found out about him is that he's really a zone entry machine, that he is
Mhm.
just good at carrying the puck through the ice, gaining the zone. And I think that's something the Flyers could really use.
Yeah, it really is a nice thing to have. He also is a teammate of Caden Lindstrom, and so that's something where uh on the power play, I feel like he's really benefited for that. He's kind of like the setup guy for him at times when he was,
Hmm.
when Lindstrom was with him. And so I was like, yeah, I saw some of that. That's good. Because if he's setting up some big time players, obviously uh the Flyers will have a few of those too. I've kept him around 29 because I think he's a high floor guy, just like you said, because of the age and everything. So I kind of put him in that same area. What's interesting is, and this shows you how good Lidstrom was. Like Bash is third in the team, 85 points, and Lidstrom had 46, but he only played in 32 games.
Oh my
So
God.
like he would have probably, been at least third on that team in scoring. But just didn't play enough. I also like Basha the way he pounces on loose pucks. I think he's really good at that. I think that's another skill. He is a quick passer, which I like. He doesn't
Hmm.
think about it. It's like boom, gets the stick right off the tape. That's good. So yeah, there's a lot to like here with this guy. And yeah, he would be the second pick guy for the Flyers, not the first pick guy.
Right. And, with all of that zone entry skill, he is able to read defenders incredibly well to skate around them. I think that's really important, and that he has excellent speed, even if like you look at his skating, it doesn't look as technically perfect, but he
Right.
has the speed. So honestly, who
He
cares?
gets there. Right.
Yeah.
I feel that way that you do too, but there's people out there that evaluate that also get crazy about skating. I know how much can get fixed with skating. Not everybody can get fixed. We've talked about it on the show, but
Right.
I feel like I'm not worried about him either.
Yeah, I think, sometimes you can go overboard with trying to fix the skating, that you break what they do well and they can't get it back
Yes.
together in the end.
Yeah.
And that's something I would worry about with him
Yeah.
particularly,
No,
just
that's a good
because
point.
of how like his zone entries look on the ice and in the highlights that I've seen of him.
I mean, Bobby Brink is an ugly skater, but
Yeah,
he's proven that he could get the job done at the NHL level if these other parts of his game come around. So yeah, you don't want to take away those good attributes. It's a really good point by you.
yeah. So I think there's two things with him that I questioned. So we know he's really, really good on the rush, right? Can he do quality work within the offensive zone? Is he good at puck cycling and anticipating and finding the open space once he gets there?
Yeah, I feel like he can get that done. I don't feel like that's his specialty or anything, but I feel like he'll get that done based on the strength he has, based on uh, the way he is first to pucks, based on his passing abilities. So I do feel like he can do that. I feel pretty confident about that.
I think the other question that stands out for him is his defensive play. You look at everything and all the charts, and all his offensive side of things are off the charts blue, and it looks great and high numbers. And then you see these like red bars on the defensive side. Like, what is going on there? And can he learn those skills?
I mean, I obviously don't watch Medicine Hat enough to know that, but I'll just give you the patented answer I always give. He's a guy that you just want to be NHL average. If he can
Hmm.
become NHL average at defense, then the rest will work. And I think he would. I haven't seen any
Yeah.
reason why he wouldn't just yet. So I think he could do that.
Yeah, I think that is really just the concern, and I think about, it's hard to think about him because, again, he's probably, like, 3 years away from playing in the NHL, right?
Yes,
So,
at least.
at least, right? So, is he a John Tortorella kinda guy? Not really, but that's 3 or 4 years down the
Yeah, don't
road,
worry
and
about it.
so,
Torts will
like, can
be
you think
out of
like that?
there. Yeah, he'll.
Y
No, you
Right.
can't think like that. For
No.
especially with your second first round pick, you can't. With the first, is it possible somebody could get in on the tail end of Torts? Maybe, but most likely no. So really, you don't think about that.
Right, and, we just talked about the life cycle of an NHL coach shortening,
Right.
um, except for some rare exceptions, and so
Right.
I think, it always sits in the back of my mind because you just
Hmm.
never know with these things, but at the same time, I just think about a kid like him trying to be a shot blocker and it going very poorly.
Right. Yeah, you can't worry about who your coach is 4 years from now or 3.5 years from now. You can't.
So, we just said, 3 to 4 years away. Like, what does that path look like, and when does he come to the AHL, do you think?
Yeah, so he's gonna be going back obviously for another year.
Right.
Let's see. Yeah, he's got a November birthday. So um another year, then you see where he's at. I forget what the cutoff age is for the AHL for a November birthday. Um I feel like he might have to go 2 years more in the WHL, but I'm not certain of that because he won't turn 20 until November 8th. So I don't know. He could be close to that cutoff. So, and I don't have that memorized in my head. That's just one of those things. So, uh, he's going to be in juniors for a little while. Then he certainly will need AHL time, and then you can see where he's at. That's the path, and that's fine. That's what the path
Mhm.
is for most.
Yeah, I mean, the cutoff is September 15th.
Yeah, so he's not going to make that. That's what I thought.
Or like the other exception, you have to have played in 4 seasons in the O. So,
Right, but that'll be his fourth season, so that's the catch
right,
22 from yeah.
right, right. So it could be possible that after the second year, he could play at the tail end of the season for a
Yeah,
couple of games.
yes, he'll definitely get that done. I would think that would happen.
Yeah, but as far as where he would fit in the Flyers, I just think there's like a really strong need for somebody like this. Because right now, Owen Tippett is pretty much the only guy that does that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And there are some, some things about him. He does have a similar body type. He's a little shorter because, Owen's a little over six. What is he, 6'2"? So,
Something like
but
that. Yeah.
but he is stocky, and so yeah, I could see some of that.
I think, there's a genuine need that the Flyers have that he could fill. I think he's a really skilled kid. It just, what is his defensive play going to look like over the next couple of years? And that's something the Flyers will need to evaluate.
Yeah, they'll need to evaluate it. You don't want to rush them. Lately some guys are getting rushed to the NHL because they're like, well, we don't want them to wait this long to get to the AHL, so we're just going to put them in our NHL lineup and hope for the best. And most will fail that way. There's a few that have done okay lately, but
Yeah.
most are gonna fail that way. So you kind of have to
Yeah.
just wait it out. But I think it'll be a good wait if you do it. And I think he's a guy that you would say, all right, this is a guy that we could look forward to in the future. And that's it. You can't take it any further. It's a draft pick. So that's it. You wait.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to switch gears and talk about Igor Chernyshov, another forward that is looking to be a first rounder in this year's draft. We're going to talk about him coming up next. So Igor Chernyshov is a left winger. Like I said, he's another older 18-year-old with a November birthday, a little bit bigger than uh, than Andrew. He's 6'2", 196, and
Hmm.
I think right now you look at rankings, you look at some of the mock drafts that are out there, and a lot of people have him in like the 20 to 22 range, and which is a little bit too far down for the first pick and maybe too far up for the Flyers' second pick. But so is there a situation where he drops to that second pick?
Yeah, I think the Russian factor could affect him. Uh, I think I have him, what, 16th? Yeah, I have him 16th, but that's where I have him ranked. That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen on draft day. I do think, honestly, I do think there's a chance. Could he drop that far? Um, I don't think he'll drop that far, but this would be a situation where if the Flyers were like, "Hey, this is the guy we're going to have play with Mitchkov, and we think he could be over at the same time as Mitchkov," then they're going to trade another pick and try and get him in the early 20s. And there's
Yeah.
probably a team out there that would do that. I think that's the situation for that one. And I don't know his contract status. I'll be the first to
Um,
admit that. Go ahead.
he is contracted with Dynamo Moscow for next season.
So just one more year.
I think so. I don't know so. I
Okay.
know he's at least under contract next season.
Right. So even if he's under contract for next year and were to go one more year there and then come over, he'd match up
Mhm.
with Mitchkov. You'd have them come in together. Uh, there's something there to like. I mean, there is, because again, I think this guy's got a tremendous wrist shot. I think it's one of the best in the draft. Uh, I think he's a really good skater. His skating ability, what I like from him, is the way he can cut through traffic. That's
Mhm.
something where the edge work really comes in more than the speed. But there is quickness there, and that's the
Yeah.
ability to cut through traffic, get to the net. If you have somebody that you're teaming with, you're going to open things up, for that player. Uh, the fact that he played in so many KHL games this year is a plus. Doesn't matter what the numbers are first year. In the MHL, obviously, he was more than a point a game, which is great. And I feel like he's one of the invisible guys of this draft, but certainly not invisible to teams. And if you play your poker right, uh, maybe he is there, but you probably have to trade up to get him. I don't think they'll take him at 12. I think they'll have
No.
somebody else they would like better at 12, but this would be that situation that you were talking about. Like, hey, we got, let's just say, I don't know, whoever's picking 19th, we got them on the line. We can make a deal with them and we can get Chernyshov. Do we want to do that? And
Yeah.
I would consider it.
Yeah, and so that's, I guess, the other question. You mentioned having him as somebody to play with Michkov is like, but we've also talked about not taking a risk on another Russian at this point. And so, like, what side of that fence do we go on with a kid like this?
Well, if they know more than we do about Michkov and he's going to be over by next year, then I'm going to risk it on this guy too, because one of his strengths is the give and go. And if I could have two guys like
Yeah.
that, that could create an awful lot of offense for the Flyers in just a couple of years. I might have to go all in on that and say, yeah, I need to make this happen if this situation occurs, because I think it's worth it. I mean, again, he's only 18 and he played 34 games in the K. That's really good. But there might be some teams that say, we just don't want to deal with Russians, or we're taking defensemen. And, if you could trade up into a spot and get him, might be worth it to do so. Now, the other thing, of course, is if you could trade down, here's the way I would trade down. I would trade down 3 or 4 spots to grab him if I'm improving my bottom pick going up. So similar to
Right.
what happened with the Islander trade. If I could do that, like
Yeah.
if he's one of the
Or
top guys,
when they picked Cam York and they traded
correct,
down.
right. So if he's one of the top guys on the Flyers board and they can make that trade and they feel like they're definitely going to get him, but they're picking him a few picks early, do it.
It is interesting because, he is a power forward with skill, which
Yeah,
is, so he's
hard to
like
find.
hard to find. I would say he's like a Tom Wilson without the fighting
Hmm.
to some degree, but maybe not as high end as Tom Wilson.
Yeah, I mean,
At the
people forget when Wilson played for Plymouth, he was a terrific player. Like he really,
Yeah,
really was. So that's
yeah.
fair. I think that's fair to say.
So, I don't dislike that at all. And especially if he has a good shot, which he does
He
to some
does.
degree. It's not like the greatest shot you'll see, but it is a good shot. And
Oh, I think
so
it'll improve. Like I do think
yeah, that's the part of it too.
I think it's good now for his age level. Like I did feel like in the first 20 picks, he's probably got like the 4th, 5th best shot. That's what I meant by one of the better shots. I think he's I think he's up there for that. But I do think it's going to improve too.
Yeah, and I think he does have potential to be a top 6 guy. A lot
Yes.
of the guys you talk about in the mid to late first round, you're like, well, he's a middle 6 guy or
Hmm.
whatever. He'll top out as a third liner. Not him. I really think he has the potential to be like a second liner in the NHL.
Yeah, I do too. And I feel like, you look at him and you say, he's playing with men now. Uh, a lot of things there are already there that you can't teach. When he comes over, he could be taught a certain amount. It'd be someone who you could pair up with Michkov for sure. Even if they both start out on the second line, fine. That's okay. And that's something that, yeah, you can't ignore, but you only are going to do that based on what happens in like the first 5 picks of the draft. If things just go kablooey, like I think they might, because I feel like in this draft, teams are going to go super safe. I just feel like they're all targeting guys that they know are going to play in the NHL. They feel really good about, safe about, and some of these other guys that are more of a risk, him just being the Russian factor more than anything, could tumble a little. And I think that's where we're at with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I just, yeah, just because of where he is ranked, like it gives me a little bit of pause related to the Flyers. But overall, I really like him. and would not be upset if the Flyers made a move to get him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if like the part of his shot, like if his release gets a little quicker, he'll be good. He'll be really good. But even if he's just a setup guy for Mitchkov at times, that's fine.
Yeah, all right. Well, another kid to add to my list of players I will get attached to and then be sad when they get drafted elsewhere, as is my lot in life with NHL prospects. That will do it for today's show. We'll be back again tomorrow with those poll results and so much more. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got mailbag questions or a prospect you want us to cover, let us know on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league like Locked On NHL. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great day, everyone.